You're listening to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based grief and loss podcast for Black women, where you will hear stories of miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, and infertility to learn there is a testimony in tragedy. You will learn how to heal, gain clarity, find hope and peace, and turn your pain into your purpose after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee. Today's episode is brought to you by sistersinloss.com. We have our Sisters in Loss brunch coming up on April 21st, 2018 in Chesapeake, Virginia. Join us and the founder of Fertility for Colored Girls, Reverend Dr. Stacey Edwards Dunn, as she comes and pours into us and our community at this brunch. The brunch is $35 and it is being held at Cutlass Jamaican Grill and Barbecue in Chesapeake, Virginia. For ticket information and more information about the brunch, go to sistersinloss.com. It is April Sisters in Loss, and it is Fertility Awareness Month. 1 week is not enough to recognize those who have been diagnosed infertile and have yet to get pregnant, stay pregnant, and bring a baby home. This month, we are recognizing our sisters who have fertility conditions like PCOS, endometriosis, or unexplained infertility. If you're interested in sharing your story in written form or on this Sisters in Loss podcast, please email me at podcast@ericanmcafee.com or just follow me on social and direct me at Erica M. McAfee. Welcome to episode 39 of the Sisters in Loss podcast. In today's podcast, we have Sosina Morgan, who shares her fertility journey and decision to adopt after going through infertility treatments. Sosi is passionate about adoption and loves to encourage other women of color to consider adoption as a way of growing their families. She is a minister, friend, daughter, and wife to Lee of 5 years. She would like to add mom to that resume. After several IUIs and too much time spent pursuing fertility treatment, Sosina and her husband Lee said yes to God's leading to pursue adoption. They are joyfully and patiently, and sometimes not joyfully or patiently, waiting to bring home their child through adoption. In today's episode, Sosi takes us back to her initial infertility diagnosis and how she and her husband, Lee, made the decision to adopt. We discuss why she is elected to stop infertility treatments and focus on adoption. And then Sosi goes into detail about the adoption process to us and how there are many resources that are out there financially for adoptions. We also discuss adoption loss, which is a first on the podcast, and how it affects her relationship with God and her relationship with her husband. Here is Sosina Morgan. Thank you, Sosi, for being a part of the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So tell us about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So, like you said, my name is Sosi. I live in Houston, Texas with my husband, Lee, and our dog, Lucas. And I am in ministry. So I am the director of ministries for a nonprofit in Houston, and we do community development.
Okay.
So basically what we're doing is we're trying to bring transformation to a very specific inner city neighborhood. And it's also the neighborhood that I live in and I go to church in, and so it's very dear to my heart. And so we run programs and offer like different social services, we do everything, honestly, anything from after school care to a senior citizens Bible study. We're just all about our neighborhood and seeing some transformation here in an urban community. And so,
awesome. I was just in Houston in July, and then, you all had the devastating hurricane. Everything's recovered since then. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's coming back. People here like to say that Hurricane Harvey put the whole city like 2 months behind schedule, which is still so true, just with the school scheduling and everything like that. There's still surprises that were like, oh, that got pushed back because of Harvey, and so we're recovering. We're Houston strong, so we're getting there.
All right.
But it definitely was a huge step back.
So tell us about your loss story and your fertility journey.
Sure. So our story, especially our fertility story, it starts back when we've been married maybe just about 3 years. and we had started talking about starting a family. And so my husband his name is Lee. Lee had taken this class in college about adoption for some reason, and then so he was very interested in like going that route, and having biological kids too. But adoption first was kind of the research he had done that was interesting to him. But then I had a really good friend who had just struggled with some postpartum depression and anxiety. And I remember her telling me, she said, I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was something like, you know, if it wasn't for those maternal hormones and like instincts, I don't know if we would have made it. Like there's something in you that when your baby is crying, no matter how much you want them to stop crying or just leave, you know, put them in a room and let them, you know, figure it out themselves, there's something in you that tells you like that's your child. You know, get up and help them. And I remember hearing that and thinking, oh my gosh, like I'm that type of mom too. You know, I would need to have biological children to kind of turn me into a mom before seeking the adoption route. And so my husband, you know, he, I think, had a lot of mercy with me there and grace. And so he was like, all right, well then let's try to conceive first then, and we'll just go that route and then adopt maybe farther on down the road. And then that was just, that started our journey of trying to become parents, and it was a lot harder than I thought. I'd also had a friend who, around that exact same time, decided that she wanted to have a baby, and we kind of became confidants, and she was pregnant within 4 months. And so I remember that I thought that was going to be me too. You know, like you decide you're going to get pregnant, and then you take a pregnancy test later on that month, and you know it all worked out. And that wasn't our story. And it was about a year later that I finally went to go see the doctor. And was telling the doctor, yeah, I just don't think, you know, I know myself, and my cycles have never been regular. I wasn't that concerned about them, but this isn't normal. And the doctor at first was like, oh, you're young, and they ran some tests, and the tests were all. You know, they came back, you know, my AMH levels were fine and different hormones and stuff were fine. And so originally the doctor didn't want to run any more tests or send me to a specialist, but I just had this feeling. I was like, I need to see a specialist. I'd like to see one. And so we asked her to actually run some tests on my husband, a sample that he gave, and she did that. And she found that his sample was abnormal. And so she decided, okay, why don't you go see an RE? And so we went to go see an RE, and they started with tests about me again. And it was such a strange, I think our infertility journey was such a strange, confusing time for me, because it was like a lot of 2 steps forward, 1 step back, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. And so for me, there was a time where they were looking into my uterus. I can't remember all the procedure names, but with some water. And they saw, like, I had a polyp in my uterus, and my uterine lining was way thicker than average. So like, oh, that's why you're not getting pregnant. But then the next cycle, everything was fine. Everything was evened out. I never, for the next almost 8 months that I did fertility treatments, I never had a thick lining or a uterine polyp again. And then it was cysts on my ovaries. So there was 1 month I went in, and they're like, oh, you know, maybe you have PCOS. That would make sense because they found that I wasn't ovulating on my own, and then I have a cyst on my ovaries. So PCOS makes sense. But after that 1 month, I never had cysts on my ovaries again, and I never exhibited any other symptoms of PCOS, which by the end of my fertility treatment, the RE actually had said, you know, I think we were wrong with that diagnosis. I don't think that you had PCOS. I think it was just a fluke month. So there was a lot of months like that where it was just like, this is weird. But the one thing that we knew consistently was, like, I wasn't ovulating on my own. My eggs or my follicles never matured enough to be released as eggs. And so they put me on Clomid and to develop those follicles, and then Ovidrel to release them and to ovulate. And so I did 4 cycles of IUIs. And then each cycle, like I shared, I'm in ministry, I'm a woman of faith. Each cycle, I really, really had, like, all the faith in the world that, like, this is the one, you know, like, I just knew that I was going to be pregnant at the end of that. And so,
can you explain what an IUI is for everyone?
Yeah, sure. So an IUI is when they... I forgot to mention also, let me mention this before I explain that, that my husband had been tested by my RE as well after that very first test, just done by my primary doctor, and he was totally fine. Again, it was just a fluke that his sample was off somehow, you know, and so what an IUI is is they time your cycles, and so you're going into the doctor's office every couple of days so that they can watch the egg grow and mature, and they know exactly when you should be taking your medicine, exactly when the egg should release, and then when the egg is at the appropriate size, and they can anticipate it being released within 24, 36 hours, you come into the doctor's office, your husband gives a sample of semen, then they wash the semen and they make sure it's the best, most strong and well-formed semen, and they inject it right into your uterus. And so the semen doesn't have to travel anywhere. It's already in there waiting for the egg to be released, because semen should stay alive in the uterus for 5 days, and it's a 24 to 36 hour kind of wait. And then it's the typical 2-week wait, and then you find out if you were pregnant. And sometimes they check, and so for me, I think they did this at least once or twice. They check after the IUI to make sure that the egg actually did release and didn't just turn into a cyst in the ovary. And so we had that done 4 different times, where they injected the semen into me, anticipating it to meet the egg, and then hopefully implant and be pregnant. For whatever reason, it just didn't happen for us. The egg never implanted. And so we started out that journey with the doctor saying that we had a 33% chance, which is higher than the normal percent chance for IUIs, which I think is about 20% to get pregnant. And that was because of my age and my hormone levels, and some other things that were just working in our favor, it seemed. And yet, it just didn't happen. In fact, the weirdest part is that those last 2 IUIs, I actually ovulated on my own. Oh, wow. And so even before I got the chance to take the Ovidril, I was taking ovulation predictor kits, OPKs. So I was taking those like every day. So it would say that I ovulated. I would call the doctor, go into the doctor, they would check, and they would be like, yeah, it's true. That egg that we've been watching grow all month is no longer there, which shows that you ovulated. And so again, very, very confusing, because it's like the first, 6 months of all this treatment, never ovulated, not once. And then the last 2 months, I ovulated both times on my own, with Clomit's help, of course, but not with Ovidril. And so I remember going to my doctor's office, and I was grieving in a way, because of all that faith and hope and expectation that I'd put into these things, and they just didn't pan out. And I went to my doctor, and we sat down in her office, and she said, I think what I'd like to do with you is just go back to trying Ovidril and then timed intercourse instead of doing the IUIs, or not Ovidril. Did I say that? I meant Clomid. Instead of doing IUIs and Ovidril, just do Clomid and timed intercourse. And I was just heartbroken, because it felt to me like taking a step back. The whole journey, I was told, if IUIs don't work, then we suggest IVF. But then we get to the point where IUIs aren't working, and she didn't suggest IVF for me because it seemed like the biggest issue is that for whatever reason, there's no implantation happening. And so we're not going to try IVF if we don't know, that you can have an egg or an embryo implant in your uterus. And so, yeah, and so I was just like super heartbroken, because I was kind of always in my head the next step, and that will surely work, And then when it wasn't, and the doctor was asking me to take a step back, or that's how it felt anyway. That was definitely a huge, just a heartbreak for me there. And so that's when adoption really started to come into my brain, because I remember going home, and I remember just being devastated, and reading a devotional for infertility. It was called the Shiloh Devotional. And there was a verse in there from Job where it talked about, I'm going to paraphrase it because I can never remember it, but it's something like, my plans have been shattered, or my plans have been altered, so my heart is shattered, or something like that. And I remember reading that, and the devotional asks you, do you relate to that? Is that how you feel? And parts of it, short, because I did feel very sad and devastated, but parts of it did not resonate with me, because I didn't feel like our plans had been altered in that way, because my husband's plan had always been adoption first, and then I was kind of getting the sense that maybe all of this was coming to a point, and I still don't know today. I don't know if I don't believe, necessarily that God makes you go through these hard things to teach you a lesson or something like that, but just the way it happened in my life, it definitely did seem that all of that had happened, and that year of trying on our own, and that 8 months of help to try was kind of culminating for us in this adoption plan. And so there was kind of this thing that was going through my head that was, no matter how much money we spend on fertility treatments and things like that, no matter how much time we spend, because at that point it was 2 years, there's no guarantee that I'll ever be a mom. But for me, adoption almost felt like this insurance that no matter how much time and no matter how much money, eventually it ends, like with my child. And so for me, that felt like the right decision at the time. And so we decided to stop any fertility treatments and to just go full force with adoption. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't end up doing Clomid in timed intercourse or anything like that. We just decided to put, I guess, all of our eggs in one basket with adoption. But even though with adoption, I felt like that's my insurance plan. Like, eventually it's going to work out, and there's hope and there's joy in that. I definitely experienced, like, the biggest loss because I decided to do adoption, which was we went through adoption process, which I guess I could share more about if you wanted to hear that. But
yeah, go ahead. Go talk about the adoption process. I think people will be interested in that.
Okay, sure. So we started with the adoption process in about February of 2017, so this year. And it started with just interviewing different agencies and deciding, do we want to foster and adopt, or do we just want to do private infant adoption? What are we open to? What agencies are available for us? Or consultants. There's all types of ways to approach adoption. And so we interviewed a couple of them, and we picked one. We picked private infant adoption through an agency in Houston. We decided not to do a consultant because with consultants, typically they're working with every state, and we didn't want to have to travel. We wanted to stay local so that when the baby is born, it wasn't like figuring out those funds, and we could just drive to a hospital, within an hour. And so we decided to go with an agency instead of a consultant for that reason. We decided to go with private infant adoption rather than foster care because the infertility, I'm sure everyone will relate to this, but the infertility treatments really did feel traumatic in some ways, and the idea that we could bring a child into our home and love them and fall in love with them and then have them taken from us because the goal is reunification with their parents. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to have to relive that trauma, which is funny because of what ended up happening to us, which I guess I'll get to that point in the story. And so for me, I really felt like private infant adoption through an agency is what we wanted to do. So we figured that out. I think we signed on with our agency in end of March. And then the rest is like a lot of paperwork. So there's a lot of paperwork to fill out. There's doctor's appointments you go to make sure you're healthy. There is fingerprinting you have to do through like the FBI and things like that. And that part of the process of adoption goes pretty quickly. It all depends on how motivated the individual is to get it all done. And for us, it probably took about 6 weeks, just a month and a half to kind of build our stuff together. Then the longest part for us was that we moved in the middle of kind of the adoption process. And so with the adoption, you have to do something called a home study, where the social worker comes to your home and kind of learns about you. But because we were moving, our agency was like, there's no point, in us doing a home study at your home because we just have to redo it once you move. So we chose to wait. And so we finally moved like mid-June. And then we had to get all unpacked and actually have a home. It couldn't just be like, we're moved in and there's boxes everywhere. We actually had to be like living there and settled there. And so by end of June, we were ready to have our home study. And so our home study took about 2 weeks to do. So home study is the social worker comes to your house and she interviews all the members of the family. So for us, it was just me and my husband. But if there's children involved, she would interview them too. And it's a pretty lengthy interview. It's about 4 or 5 hours, and they ask everything. They ask about how you make decisions. They ask about how you budget and decide what to do with your finances. They ask about they even ask like super hard to answer questions like, what do you believe about punishment and discipline, or even what do you believe about how is your sex life? Like they ask a ton of very personal questions. Yes. And then if it's not weird enough, then they separate the two of you and they do an interview They did an interview with my husband for 2 hours, and then an interview with me for 2 hours. And that's it's split into 2 different days because it's a lot of interviews, and you have to go to work and stuff like that. And so they split it into 2 days. And then at the end of all the interviews, they tour your house, and they look through all your stuff, and they make sure it's a safe place for a child to live. And so they're looking for things like we have firearms. So if you have firearms, you have to make sure that they're locked up, and you keep the bullets or the ammo away from the firearms, things like that. Or if you have medicine or alcohol in your home, it has to be a certain amount of feet off of the floor so a kid would stay out of it. So look for things like that. Even simple things like knives, like making sure your knives just aren't on your kitchen counter, but you have to put them up and away just so kids can be safe. And then they come back a week later to make sure that any corrections that they did ask you to make, that you've corrected them. So for instance, that was actually one thing that happened to us, is we had our knife block on our counter because it's convenient, right?
Right.
But they asked us to actually get it up out of the way and put it in a cabinet. So they came back a week later to make sure we'd done some of those things that they'd asked us to do.
Today's episode is brought to you by sistersinloss.com. We are holding a Sisters in Loss brunch on April 21st, 2018 in Chesapeake, Virginia. The Sisters in Loss community is a community of Christian Black women who have experienced a loss due to a miscarriage, infant or child loss, pregnancy loss, stillbirth, or infertility. Our mission is to tackle the difficult questions around grief, loss, marriage, love, and self-care while on the journey of healing through the Word of God, gaining clarity and peace by the power of testimonies, and in finding an empowering path forward after loss. This year's theme is From Surviving to Thriving. The brunch is kicking off National Infertility Awareness Week, which is April 22nd through 28th, 2018. Our goal is to provide the women in attendance there a support community for their grief journey, hope after loss, and to go from surviving to thriving after loss. For more information on the Sisters in Loss brunch, visit sistersinloss.com.
Or mount our furniture. We never even knew what it meant to mount some of our furniture, but we have these tall bookshelves that she wanted to make sure were screwed into the wall. So
right.
It makes sense now than thinking about babies pulling up on things and stuff. So they give us about a week to resolve all those issues. They come back and check and make sure you did that. They take pictures of your house, and then it goes into this 3-week home study panel where your social worker would write up this 30 to 40 page document about your family. It's really insane to think that there's a 40-page document about our family out there somewhere. But she writes that up, and then she takes it to this panel of other, social workers and people at your agency, and then they decide whether or not you are an approved family. They're going to approve you to adopt with them. Mm-hmm. And so for us, they did approve us, and we got our approval date was August 8th. And so we're super excited because that means that they can start showing your book to families. And so part of the adoption process also, I didn't mention this, is you're creating a book about your life, and you kind of share about your family, and you show pictures of your friends and your home. You share about traditions that you have, anything that you think a birth mom or dad would want to know about your family when making the decision on who to place with.
Right.
So we made a book like that. And so when you get approved, it just means, okay, now we can start showing your book to potential families. Mm-hmm. And so for us, one reason we chose our agency is because our agency does emergency placements, which means that 90% of the families that come into our agency to make an adoption plan for their child have already had the child. And so they're calling from the hospital, or they're calling from home 2 weeks after bringing the baby home and realizing, I can't do this. And then we also chose that agency because the average wait time was about 9 months, which to me felt really doable because 9 months is the average wait time, as far as pregnancy. So I felt 9 months, I can do that. And an emergency placement, that sounds great, because we're ready. We're ready for this. And so August 8th, we got approved. And then actually just a month later, September 8th, is when we got the call that we had been picked by a birth mom and a birth dad to parent their son. And it was September 8th, and the due date was September 20th. But the mom felt because she had had children previously, she knew her body, and she was this baby's coming, he's coming soon. And so they told us to get prepared and to pick names and get a car seat and decide on some things that we'd need to answer about in the hospital. We were super excited, and my parents came down, and it just felt like the Lord has been good to us. Like, we have waited for so long, and it's been years, and this whole adoption process, was paused because of moving. And then look at God, we get approved August 8th, and we get picked September 8th. Like, we really felt like this is it. And so we got everything ready, and I had this, anxiety in me the whole time, because there's always that chance that the birth mom will change her mind. And I think every adoptive mom kind of has that go through her head after the match. And that was one of the reasons I was excited about having an emergency placement, because if the baby's already born, the chances of them changing their mind once they see that, it's less.
Right.
And so I was a little bit surprised to find out she hadn't had the baby yet, but was still super excited. And they got everything we needed. We had a name for the baby. It was, for almost a week, it really felt like, this is our son. Like, we're ready. And I had really bonded with the child and with the birth mom, and I was very excited. And then she was supposed to have a doctor's appointment, and it was a Monday. And it was right after Hurricane Harvey. And so I'd actually been helping muck out some of a friend's house their house had gotten destroyed because of the hurricane. And so I'd been there all day in boots and overalls and helping muck out their house, and had been wondering, I hadn't heard anything, but I knew she'd had a doctor's appointment that day. So I was confused about that, but I was like, you know what? Let me not worry. Let me just trust. And then I got home around 1, and I got a call from a social worker, and she said, and I don't know why she told me this way, but she did. She just came out and said, the baby was born. The baby boy was born this morning, and I was so excited, and I started crying and celebrating, and then I realized that she was being very quiet, which the first time when she first called me to tell me we'd been picked, she was celebrating with me, and so I got quiet, and I said, is everything okay? Is the baby okay? And she said, she took one look at him and decided she couldn't do it. She couldn't place him for adoption. And, and it was, it's even hard to think about right now. It's like I don't let myself think about it all the time. But it felt like a punch to the stomach. Even I remember when, the days that followed, just sobbing, and my husband always reminds me that I would say, ouch. Like, I would be crying and crying, and I would say, ouch, because it really did feel almost physically painful to have waited so long and to have really received that child in my heart as my son, and then to have him taken away, and there's nothing I can do about it. There's no choice that I can make. I had no control over the situation. He was just taken, from me, and also the idea that, we go into this adoption, me and my husband, because we do care about the moms, who have to make this hard decision out of love for their child. And so there's really no one to be angry with either, Right. It's like, you made this decision that you felt like was best for you and this child. And I understand, because I'm sure if I had gotten the opportunity to see his face, I wouldn't have wanted to let him go either, and I didn't. Yeah, so that was definitely, I think, like I said earlier, I went into adoption thinking, this is an insurance policy. You can't possibly feel as much pain with adoption as you do with infertility and other things. And then to find out that wasn't true, that you can still experience just as much pain and loss and grieving. And I did. I took days off of work to deal with it. I couldn't even get up, and my boss, because we are a Christian ministry, came over to pray with us that night, which was awesome and so sweet of him. And my family rallied around me, and my family was grieving too and heartbroken. My parents had driven here. It's a 4-hour drive to be here for his birth, and had been waiting for him to arrive, to turn around and just go home, not grandparents. And so it was hard even to deal with the grieving of my parents, or even the grieving of my husband, while also dealing with my own grief about it. Was, I think, the word for it, especially infant loss. And so while this wasn't that, and the baby was healthy, it definitely feels like failed adoption is definitely a type of loss for me. And the strange part about it is our agency says that it only happens about 10% of adoptions, which is a very small percentage when you think about it in the grand scheme of things. The 10% of adoptions end in a failed adoption. When I had first asked them that question, I asked them when we were interviewing back in February, well, what's your rate of adoption failures? And the social worker said, does it really matter? Because if it happens to you, it's 100%. Hearing that statistic isn't going to make you feel any better. And it was so true. And then she told me, of course, it's 10%.
Right.
But it was so true because when it happened to us, it wasn't like, well, it's only 10% that it happens. No, it was 100% because it happened to us and the pain was 100%, And so, so it's funny to kind of think back on that and tell my whole story because it did. The adoption process started with like this idea that like, this will be pain-free. And then, continued with a lot of pain, and we're still in the process. We decided to continue with the process and to continue with our agency and to continue to hope and hold on to hope that we will get to bring a baby home soon and that we won't experience another adoption loss.
Your journey, your fertility journey is just, oh my goodness. And then, going back and forth with the doctors and trying to understand, they saw one thing one day, didn't see a thing one day. And then for your husband to have that, class or whatever put on his heart, way back in college for you all to adopt. And then this is where you are, as much as you may not feel like this is where God's leading you and your husband, as far as your parenting journey, this is kind of where y'all are, which is crazy when you think about it. Cause that's, that's a long time ago for him to, wanting to adopt and having that on his heart for so long, even before you all tried to have children. I just thank you for sharing that. I thank you for sharing the whole story. It's definitely has blessed me. What are some resources out there for other women that are considering adoption?
Yeah, so there are a couple different resources that I wanted to highlight. I kind of have two different answers to that question, though.
Okay, that's fine.
There are 3 books that I would suggest to any person considering adoption or already in the adoption process. One is called In On It, and it's by a woman named Elizabeth O'Toole.
Okay.
One is called Forever Mom by a woman named Mary Austin. And one is called The Hopeful Mom's Guide to Adoption by Rachel Garlinghouse. And so I love those books because they give a very real understanding and expectation about like all that adoption accomplishes. So if anyone's naive like me and is thinking, this is going to be pain-free, it kind of nips that in the bud. But also on the flip side, if anyone is thinking, I don't know if I can do adoption, that sounds really hard and there's too much risk, it kind of nips that in the bud too and gives us a very realistic understanding. That's what I meant to say. And so I really suggest those books. And there's also like a ton of grants. If anyone is worrying about like the financial side, there are so many grants and so many people. And I know this is from my life because as a Christian and growing up in church, there are so many people in my networks that have just been so generous with us to help us do this and bring a baby home. I think there's something about the idea of adoption that makes people open their hearts to that. And so my advice for that would be don't worry about the funds. They will come. And then once you decide I'm going to adopt, almost every place that you want to spend, you're kind of weighing it through your head like, could I save this instead? And so for us, we didn't think we'd be able to afford the adoption, and honestly, we wouldn't be able to if it wasn't for grants and people in our community and savings. And so I think if we can do it, anybody can do it. But my other answer to that question is that there's actually not a ton of resources out there, in my opinion, for Black women who are considering adoption. And that is really close to my heart because when I look at social media, like Instagram, or even all 3 of the books that I mentioned, as much as I love them, this is true for them too, or even adoption children books, it's never people of color who are adopting. It's always white parents featured in those things that are adopting.
Well, maybe it's time for you to write your book.
Yeah, go for it.
I say maybe it's time for you to write your book.
Maybe I will. I'd love to be a voice for that. But the other thing that's even concerning for me in that, and I love transracial adoptions. I think, it's not color or blood that makes a family, it's love. But the thing that's concerning for me about that is that then when you think about the word adoption and you think about people of color, what you're kind of assuming is that the person of color is the one who placed their child for adoption or is the one that was adopted.
Right.
And I don't love that narrative. And I know that there are tons of people of color who do adopt and for some reason are just not highlighted. And so you're right. I love to bring awareness to that so that people, when Black women are thinking about infertility treatments, I already know that in the Black community, infertility is not talked about as much. Right. And isn't like, oh, Black women struggle with infertility too? Yes, of course. Yes. And so drawing awareness to that, but then drawing awareness to the fact that, like, okay, yes, Black women do struggle with infertility and can do infertility treatments, but Black women can also adopt and can adopt Black kids, white kids. They can adopt from other countries. Like, this is something for us too. And I think when maybe some people consider that and then look on social media or read books about it, and all they're seeing is white people doing it, then we lose that representation, and it doesn't feel like it's possible for us. Exactly. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are resources, but not ones for us. And so that's kind of what I'm passionate about and want to create, is bring awareness to that. And maybe you're right. Maybe I'll write my own book one day, and other Black women will see that book and think, oh, okay, I can do this too. It's not just for people from other communities.
Well, you've already spoken. You've already put it out there, so it's already written and spoken.
Okay, was that a prophetic word?
Yes, it was.
It was.
It's already
I'll receive it.
Yes, I know. Yeah, and I agree with you, everything. When we kind of talk back and forth before we got on the podcast or just in our conversations offline and through social media, I knew that I wanted to have you up here because, like you said, there aren't a lot of Black people who do adopt. And for you to talk about your journey is just, it's good for us to shed light on this topic, that there is another option that's out there for those of us who do have infertility, like yourself and like me. We can go adopt, which is another option, which is awesome. Last question I have for you is, what encouraging words can you give the mom that's out there that's waiting on their baby, waiting just to get pregnant, or just waiting for a baby, for an adoptive baby?
Yeah, so the thing, I am one of those moms. So I'm speaking to myself when I say this. I am one of those waiting moms who is still waiting to bring home my child. And the thing that encourages me the most is, I think it's Psalm 113, and it says that the Lord makes a childless woman a happy mother of children in her home. And I tell myself that all the time, because I'm like, I believe in God's promises. This is something that Scripture says, and it's so specific too, which I love. I think God was thinking about women like us when He would write things like that or inspire things like that. Like, He makes a childless woman a happy mother of children in her home. That really encourages me, inspires me. So I would like to share that with everyone. And I think it's important to hold on to that hope and those promises. When it hasn't happened yet, we can say, like, it hasn't happened because God is orchestrating it. It's still in the works. It's still coming. But I also would like to encourage people that while that is true, and we do need to trust God's timing, we do need to hold on to our hope and our faith, it's still okay to have all the negative feelings with that too. It's still okay to be angry. It's still okay to, like, get on our knees sometimes and just be mad at God or beg Him. It's still okay to sometimes have those days where we just want to cry and tell our husbands, I'm never going to get to be a mom. It's okay to be human and to say those things. And I think that's something that I wish someone really would have told me, because like I shared at the beginning, every single IUI, I was like, yes, this is the one, and any time I had a creeping of doubt, I would kill myself with guilt. Like, how could I doubt, or I'd take a pregnancy test and I would think, oh, darn, it's negative. And I'd be like, no, you can't think that. You need to just think that it's too early to test, and I just killed myself trying to force myself to be this, like, joyful person when sometimes I just wanted to cry about it, And so that's what I would encourage people with is those things are all true. God is orchestrating it. It's all in His perfect timing. We need to hold on to hope and faith, but it's also okay while we're holding on to that hope and faith to experience the pain and to share that with God and recognize that He's in it with us, that He's totally present in the pain, even if sometimes it feels like He's not or He seems silent. that all of that is okay and all of it is permissible. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. So where can we find you on social?
So you can find me. I have a YouTube. I'm not as active on it as I had planned to be, but my YouTube name is Silly Nilly Sosi, and my name is spelled Sosi. Or I'm very active on Instagram. My Instagram is just my name, Sosina, but the O is a 0, so it's S0SINA. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sosi, for being on the podcast and sharing your adoptive journey. It's been a blessing to me.
Thank
so I
you.
hope it blesses everyone else.
Thank you. I hope so too. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I pray the show was inspirational and a blessing to you. The show notes and links for today's podcast can be found on ericaandmcafee.com/podcast. Please join us offline in our private Facebook group at sistersinloss.com. Please rate and leave a 5-star review of the show in Apple Podcasts or where you listen to podcasts. Keep the faith, and I'll talk to you next Wednesday.